Hi friends, back today with another recipe for you. Today I'm going to be making bacon cheddar chive scones. So I've measured and prepped some of the ingredients ahead of time. So some of the key ingredients that we're going to need for this recipe is some cheddar cheese. I have white cheddar in my refrigerator already open, so I'm using that today, even though I actually prefer the orange because it kind of shows up nicer in the scones, but we're using what's on hand. Got some bacon already prepped here, about a cup of it, snipped into small pieces. This is Nuski's bacon, which is a bacon that we get at Fresh Market, which we think just surpasses all other brands of bacon that we've tried so far. And then I've got about 1/3 of a cup of chopped chives here. I actually have a chives plant growing in a pot outside in my yard. So I went out and snipped that this morning. And so we got those 3 ingredients. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is mix up the dry ingredients. So we need 2 cups of flour, that's 1, 2, right, and we need 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and just the tiniest bit of sweetness, 2 teaspoons of sugar. All right, we're going to give those a whisk. Get them all mixed together there so we don't have any lumps of baking powder or salt that we bite into. All right, those are our dry ingredients. Now, another key ingredient, of course, in scones is butter. And so I've got half a stick of butter cut into small cubes. I'm going to put that into my dry ingredients. And then I'm going to just mix that in with my hands, trying to incorporate the butter into the flour somewhat, just by taking those butter cubes and kind of twisting it in my fingers. So we don't want the butter melted. We want to have little pieces of butter still in our scones. Kind of, if you've ever made pie crust, it's kind of the same process, although when I make pie crust I usually use a pastry blender, which I could do with this, but this isn't as much butter to work in, so just going to use our fingers here. So get some of the butter in small pieces, some of it stays in a little bit more medium-sized pieces, and we just kind of want it to be a crumbly texture. That's good. Now we're going to mix in our cheese, chives, and our bacon. So I'm just going to take all these ingredients. And again, just give it a mix with my hands to try to incorporate it evenly. So this recipe actually calls for the liquid. It calls for heavy cream or whipping cream. I do not have any right now in my refrigerator, so I'm going to use half and half. Now probably it would give a richer, maybe flakier texture with the heavy cream, but I'm not going to run to the store just to get that, so we're going to use what's on hand. All right, so now we're going to add in the cream. So I had this in my refrigerator so it would stay cold. We're going to stir in 3/4 of the cream actually going to use a fork to stir that together. I will probably need all that liquid, but I'm not going to put it all in immediately because I like to put most of it in and give it a stir and then see how much more I will need. And sometimes I find with making scones, depending on the humidity here in Florida, today it's a very humid day, the flour absorbs liquid more than on a less humid day. And so sometimes I actually end up adding more liquid than the recipe calls for. So those are the kind of things you just kind of learn with experience. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. So that's just the way it is. Like, I'm going to just kind of take my hands and see if I can get this batter to hold together, or this dough, I should say. And if it'll hold together, incorporating those dry ingredients, and I think we're good, but kind of almost feel like it could use a little more liquid. Just mix that in a little bit more to see. All right, I'm gonna put it out here on the counter. And give it just a little bit of kneading here to get it to hold together. All right, I think that's going to be good. So I'm going to press it into a round. Now, actually, I think I'm going to do it into 2 rounds today and make each scone a little bit smaller because I have in my freezer some cranberry orange scones that I made the other day, and I made them small. And so if I make these small, that means when I'm hungry for a scone, I can have a little bit of the savory and a little bit of the sweet in the same breakfast, the best of both worlds. I know my daughter Jenny would agree with me on that. Savory and sweet. Awesome. All right. Get my sugar out of the way there. All right, so this is kind of the size of one of the rounds, and I divided the dough into 2 rounds. So put that one over there, this one here. All right, so I'm going to cut and do this way. So I'm getting 6 little rectangles out of each round of dough. I could do them even smaller. I think I did the cranberry orange ones even smaller than that. All right, there, I made a couple smaller ones there. So here I am back with my baking tray. So now I'm going to put the scones on there. A little bit of space between each one. Now, I've read that if you put scones in the freezer for 10 or 15 minutes, that they will rise up higher when you put them in the oven to bake. So I usually don't turn my oven on to preheat until I have the scones all mixed up like I do here. And I'm going to stick this tray in the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes while my oven heats up, and then we'll be back, and I will brush the top of these with a little bit of half and half to help them brown, and then they'll go into the oven for about 20 minutes. Okay, fellow bakers, back now with my scones that have been resting in the freezer about 10-15 minutes while my oven came up to a temperature of 425 degrees. So now I've got a little bit of the half and half here that I'm going to brush on on top of the scones. This just helps with the browning a little bit. And once these are brushed, they're going to go in the oven. So I start checking them at 15 minutes, especially since they're small size, but may take up to 20 minutes or more depending on your oven. So let's get these into the oven, and then I'll show you the result when they're finished. And I'm going to try one because I haven't had my breakfast yet, so I can't wait. All right, I've just taken these scones out of the oven. They smell so amazing. If you could just smell them, you would want to make these just based on smell alone. But they also look very beautiful, nice brown on the top. I can see bits of bacon on the sides. I can see cheese. I don't know if you can see this, melty and oozing out. And I would say all in all, these are pretty amazing. I can't wait to try one this morning. I've had 1 cup of coffee, but I haven't eaten anything for breakfast yet because I wanted to wait for these to get done. And I've got my second, show you my Storyville mug, my second half of a cup of coffee here waiting for me to reheat in the microwave. Maybe not ideal, but I can't have a scone without a little bit of coffee. So that's what's happening next. So I hope you will give this recipe a try.